Can everyone hear me?
There's a whole bunch of agendas up here. I don't know if you want to give them
Welcome
to somebody.
to our session to discuss the after fire impacts of the Lake Christine fire, especially focused on debris and flood. A few logistical things. We have exits right out this way, restrooms out this way and to the right. If there is an emergency, we also have exits in the building here and emergency exits behind us. When you do leave for public safety notice, the doors on the left will be locked. The doors on the right have a motion sensor, so make sure you're walking slowly or waving your arms. We have had people run right into those doors. And welcome. Si habla español, bienvenidos a todos. Tenemos servicio de intérprete hoy, entonces si quiere la oportunidad de escuchar a todas las presentaciones en español, por favor, pregúntale a Jen. We have interpreter services today in Spanish for anybody that would prefer to hear the presentation in Spanish. Jen is here and she has audio equipment to support with that. So once again, welcome. Today's session really came out of a recognition that we're almost 1 year following the Lake Christine fire over here. I had about 12,588 acres burned, lost 3 homes, evacuated 200 people, and a cost for the response of about $25 million. We thought that we put out the fire, get people back in their homes, get everyone back on their feet when the job is done. But one of the things that I've continued to learn is that after the fire, there is an incredibly increased risk of flood and debris flow, 20 to 60 times the volume of water you expect from a typical rainstorm. So what we want to do, I should have introduced myself. I'm sorry, I'm Birch Barron. I'm the emergency manager for Eagle County. What's important to me is that we are offering opportunities for members of the community to understand this risk, have an opportunity to ask questions about what it means to you, where you live, give you some tools and some information for things that you can do to help make yourself and your family safe if we were to see a flood or debris flow incident. And then lastly, that we can hear from you where you see needs in your community for government. This is not just Eagle County government. This is a combined group that consists of Eagle County, Pitkin County, Garfield County, Town of Basalt, as well as Carbondale. We're in an area in here where there are a lot of people who care very deeply about this community, and this is very much the result of a lot of those people talking together and saying, how can we better reach out to the people that live here? So thank you. I'm going to quickly introduce all of our speakers that we'll have, and then we'll introduce our first speaker, Scott Thompson, Fire Chief for Roaring Fork Fire and Rescue. What we're going to do, the way we'll organize tonight, is each of these individuals will have a few minutes to speak on a specific topic that we felt was important to share with the community, and then we'll invite a few other individuals up to participate in the panel and really get feedback and information, answer questions that you might have. So we have up here today with us Brett Lowe, who's Director of Pitkin County Public Safety Answering Service. When we call 911, it's Brett and his people. We have Valerie here, who's Valerie McDonald, who's the Emergency Manager for Pitkin County. Erin May comes to us from FEMA. She's here specifically to talk about flood insurance programs and what you can and can't expect from those programs. Sheriff James Van Beek is the Eagle County Sheriff. We all know Ryan Mahoney, Town Manager for Town of Basalt. Police Chief Greg Knott, Police Chief for the Town of Basalt, and Chief Scott Thompson, Chief of Roaring Fork Fire Rescue. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott. You come up here and I'll give him the microphone to talk a little bit about the flood and debris flow risk in this community. Scott.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for paying attention and coming to this. I would hope that this was standing room only. Disappointed that it's not. I wouldn't be here if there was not a real threat, and there is. And I'm going to show you an area that there's 80 to 90% chance that it's going to slide, cause a debris flow, which means that it's going to back up and it's going to release. It has to do with 3 counties, and there's 3 counties that have been working on this. I've been fire chief here for almost 20 years, and I've never seen 3 counties come together and work the way they have been. You know, it's a real threat. And I can't say that enough and be pointed enough. I want to put you to this map. This outline is the burn scar. Just to put it in perspective, town of Basalt is right here. See this big red area? That's one of the areas that we're very concerned about. The other area, that's above Elgibel, very concerned about. Personally, I don't know a lot about mud and flood and what the Bear team did, but they did this after the fire. But this, to me, is terrifying. That area is lodgepole pine that burned with an intensity that sterilized the soil. I was just up there last weekend. The water is sheeting over the blackened earth, hitting the roadway and eating the roadway out. So it's doing exactly what the Bear team told us it would do. It's not absorbing moisture. So that should scare us all. So another perspective, this is for all of us that have been in Upper Cattle Creek, this is that private property, Fender cabin, there's 7 or 8 cabins up there. Yes, those are in peril. But what I'm worried about is the Garfield County section downriver. What they experienced near Durango last year in the 416 fire is the water event that was 2, 3, 4 miles away, that each ravine added in and just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We don't quite have that much topography that would cause something like that, but everybody in this room probably saw 2 inches of rain with a microburst. Our weather on the backside of Basalt Mountain is different than the weather on the front side of Basalt Mountain. The only other place that I've ever seen like this is Storm King Mountain in Glenwood. We had several instances during the fire where the weather station that's on the crown was absolutely wrong compared to what was on the mountain. So that's why I really want to pass on to all of you, use Pick and Alert. Pick and Alert. That's the first place the information is going to come out. It's also going to come out on Bearfield Alert and EC Alert, Eagle County Alert. But the first place that we're going to do notification is Pick and Alert. So that's an important piece. And what I ask each one of you in this room, you know, there's only 40 people here, pass it on to 2 or 3 people, please. All your neighbors. People in Cattle Creek, every one of them. You know, and those beautiful houses that are right along the creek, should take serious warning to this. And, you know, my goal is that we don't have any loss of life. And that's possibly a very great possibility if the worst comes true with this. And I hate to stand up here and be the downer, but that's the truth of the matter. We dodged the bullet with the fire. Hopefully we can dodge the bullet from Mother Nature, because that's next. Any questions as far as the map and what I've shown you? Please come up here. We'll be here later on if you want to look at it closely. Yes?
What is the area right above the salt that you indicated?
The area above the salt, this area?
Yeah, where is that?
That's the base of the cliffs, and kind of, it comes down into where the Forest Service building is, up the frying pan, just outside of Basalt on the left.
Okay.
It's kind of like the next little area where the runoff will come that's not in the Lake Christine little basin there.
Are there drainages which would divert it towards Frying Pan and miss the residential areas of Ridge and Silkers?
Depending on where it is, yes and no. You know, if we have a weather event and it's going to cause problems up there, it's probably going to cause damage closer to it. There has been some diversions, and Mr. Mahoney will kind of explain some of that stuff on Cedar and Pinion Drive. We can talk about that too. And make sure that I hit on all the stuff that I was supposed to hit on. Okay, I think that's it. So the next person is Ryan Mahoney, the town manager of Basalt, to speak.
Thank you, Chief. So to answer that question a little bit more, one thing to keep in mind as we're talking is that debris flows are not like normal floods. As soon as you start getting culverts and drainages backed up, that water goes in ways that is unpredictable and won't necessarily show up on that flood map. So part of today is not just to scare you with maps with large red and dark red areas, but actually to talk to you a little bit about what our community is doing and what you can do to protect yourself. So Ryan's going to talk a little bit about the town's projects.
Thank you. Oh, good, y'all just here. Hi, good evening. Ryan Mahoney, I'm the town manager of Basalt, and the town has been doing a number of things since the fire. As the chief mentioned, we sort of dodged the bullet with the fire, but you know, I think with the aftermath of the fire, we're taking it pretty seriously. For us, the town, the fire was one thing, but then it splintered afterward into a number of projects that we're working on. So the first, obviously, the gun range is a community discussion that we continue to have, and we won't talk too much about that this evening, but another one is fire mitigation. So the town has been taking the lead within our community to try to get some of the homes, particularly in that hillside area, mitigated just as a good practice and trying to avoid should there be another fire in the future, because this probably will not be the only fire that we see in the Roaring Fork Valley by any stretch. We also did a nice fire mitigation project in the downtown on a steep hillside right there on Midland Spur. And we did that in part because we sensed that there was potential threat there for wildfire. We have a lot of people gather there in the summertime for the Sunday markets. And so wanted to use that as a good showcase so that people can come by and see what fire mitigation can look like. So it's not just all about clear cutting. They're using a technique that is more of a mosaic technique, so it actually ends up growing back in and looking rather nice and green and lush, but it'll help protect the hillside. So if you get an opportunity, come and take a look at that, and you can be in touch with either the town of Basalt or the fire district, Eagle County. There are resources available right now in the form of some grants to protect your properties. The fire district and Eagle County will always come out and do free inspections of your property to give you an idea of what's needed to protect it. So I would definitely take advantage of that while there's opportunity right now. The town of Basalt will also continue. This is sort of an emerging program, but trying to get around different parts of town to offer perhaps hauling out some of the cuttings, and we'll take them to the dump for you. You just have to get them cut and stacked on your property. So stay tuned for that. But the main topic for tonight, of course, is the mud and flood. And since the fire, the town has taken the lead on the administering the grants that we got for EWP, so Emergency Watershed Protection. We're partnering with Eagle County and CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and our main focus is to protect properties and life. And so we've been underway with the grant throughout the spring. Right now, all of the engineering and planning are happening, and I just in fact saw today that we're getting some of the approvals from NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which basically greenlights some of our projects. The projects that were identified stemmed out of the Bear Team study that occurred after the fire, and since that time they identified several drainages where protection could be put into place. And when we say this, the protection, a lot of it is pretty rudimentary. So you'll do some berming In places there's ditches, and it's all usually pretty basic. Culverts that are existing, a lot of those will be retrofitted with trash tracks and things like that. But it's not big, huge walls or anything that are being created. We have reached out to most of the people whose homes were identified as being at risk, according to the NRCS study. So if you have not heard from us already, your house or home or property was not identified as being sort of in the first line of risk should there be a flood. That, of course, does not mean for you to put your guard down and not be ready and not be paying attention, because I think there is some unpredictability as far as what the floods and reflows can do. So we are going to be starting, for those, you asked a question about the salt. That has been our main focus because we have the highest concentration of folks right there as a first priority. And so the town is going to get started and do a fairly sizable mitigation project up above the Bassburg. If you're aware of where those condominiums are, at the top of Pinion Drive, kind of near the water plant. And we have about a 4-acre site up there where we're going to basically create a great big bucket, and it will catch and drop out some of the debris. It's not necessarily a catch-all, but it definitely helps slow down the speed and will help catch some sediment as it comes down the hill. We've also been in contact with the property owners that are sort of in the direct line of risk should there be a debris flow. And as you might imagine, before we had great studies about floodplains and floodways and bridges, that being one of the older neighborhoods in the town, they just kind of cut roads where they thought they made the most sense, and sometimes that ended up severing the natural path of the water as it would come downhill. So that's sort of our first order of business, is to try to protect those homes who ended up going through that sometime in ancient history. So, and then other areas do include Elgeville over in the tree farm area. That's another big one that's already slid last year as part of the monsoon cycle, and we expect that we'll probably see more. It's definitely nice to see the green on the hillside, but definitely don't let that have you think that that'll catch or prevent the mud flows, because those roots are still quite shallow in there. But it is a positive sign nonetheless. So to keep my time from going too long, we are working our way around Basalt Mountain. We have identified, as I said, a number of the riskiest sort of debris flow paths, and we're planning on getting that done this year. We had 220 days from the time we signed the grant to have all of those projects in place, and so we're working hard to get there. So that's underway, and I'm happy to answer any quick questions. I know we'll have a Q&A at the end, but otherwise I'll pass it off to Aaron from.
Am I next?
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. I'd like to introduce Aaron May, who comes to us representing FEMA, specifically to talk about the flood insurance program. It's one of the themes you'll hear over and over again tonight, is that all of the things that we're doing will not stop the water and the debris from coming down. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to divert it away from homes, but also that you understand everything you need to know about the insurance programs that are out there to protect yourself and your homes. So thank you, Erin.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, everybody, so you have to put up with my weird voice. So first of all, I just like to ask people, how many of you have already bought a flood policy? I don't see enough hands. How many of you gotten a quote from your agent? Thought maybe it was a little too pricey. Well, if so, give me a holler afterwards and I'll see, chat with you, see if there's some other options for you. So I'm happy to talk to you one-on-one afterwards about that. So you guys talked about wanting me to talk about mitigation. I have a feeling you guys know more than I do, but one of the things that I think is really important for you guys to keep in mind is, if you have an NFIP policy, a flood policy, we do not cover contents in the basement. So if you're in some of these areas that are in red, I would recommend you get the stuff out of there. It seems like people always put their photographs and their mementos in the basement. After the Boulder flooding, I talked to a gentleman who had a whole, really cool book collection all in the basement. So he had to take all of this, these really, really ancient books to a place to see if they could fix them and correct the mold. So if you could avoid that, I'd say put them someplace else, take them to the office, second story, someplace where you can store them for the summer, and keep them out of harm's way till the rain season and the melt ends. I think the hardest thing for most people to deal with is those things that they can't replace, that they lose. So if you can, you can buy new furniture, but you can't, get your wedding pictures back. So that's something I always like to tell people is move the things you can't replace to someplace is safe and where it's at now. And then the biggest thing that I'm sure you guys are going to talk about it later, but do you guys know what to do if there's a flood risk? I mean, what do you guys think this, if you get the evacuation call or you get the, hey, we've got flooding, what do you think is the smartest thing to do? Higher ground, and that's it. Go up, not out. I mean, the most of lost lives come when people get in their car and go someplace and travel through water that they don't know how deep it is. And it only takes I think it's 2 feet of water to send your car downstream. So it's very quick. And you think, oh, that's not going to go over my grill. I can go through that. Well, this is faster running water than usual. There's debris in there you might not be able to see. So especially this is going to be black water when it comes in. You will not see anything. So it's very different. So if you can shelter in place and go up to a second floor, that's the better modus operandi to follow. So, and then the one thing I'd really like to talk to you guys about is how many of you think FEMA's just going to come in and make you whole again if there's a big flood? So after the fires, you maybe know that's not true. So here in Colorado, it's pretty hard for us to meet they have a standard that they follow, and our disasters don't tend to be the size of Hurricane Harvey. So it makes it harder for us to meet that qualification level for you guys as individual owners to get grant monies. So number one, you have to have a presidentially declared disaster. And these guys, as emergency managers, they'll get grant money from us to rebuild your infrastructure. But the chances of you guys getting that, I think in the last 30 years, it's only happened twice in Colorado. So that gives you an idea of how unusual it is here for individuals to get that money. And that's why that insurance is such a key piece. For most people, it's your number one biggest investment. So why wouldn't you protect it? I mean, we all have health insurance, right? We all have car insurance. We all have homeowners insurance. Do you know that you're more likely to have a loss from flood than you are from fire? Hard to believe out here in Colorado, but even in Colorado, you're 4 times more likely over a 30-year mortgage to have a flood loss. So that's a big deal. And that's why the National Flood Program came into place, was because the private industry couldn't figure out a way to make money selling flood insurance, so they pulled out. And so FEMA came in and they developed all these standards and tried to make it safer with the new construction that was coming in. And with that, they developed the flood insurance program. So, there's a reason we're around, and it's because it's the number one natural disaster worldwide for loss of life and property. So if you're not protecting your home after a fire, you've got nobody to blame but yourself when the flood hits your house. I hate to say that, but every event I go to, I worry about you guys, because I think you guys think, oh, you're a naysayer, and I hope you waste your money on flood insurance and you never need it. I really do. Because that's what we do most of the time with our other insurance too, is how many claims have we had? Yeah?
I called my agent last year after the fire and asked about flood insurance. I'm in the manufacturing of.
We cover, we'll cover manufactured homes.
Okay, because I'm with State Farm,
Mhm.
and we didn't think there was anything available.
Oh, no, we cover. Yeah, absolutely. And the problem that we run into is that they maybe don't sell flood insurance that often, so they're not as familiar with some of the intricacies of the policy, like a mobile home.
You should know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But when you run into those things, my card's in the back, take my card, I'm happy to help you with those questions, but we do cover manufactured homes. What are some of the other things that I wanted to go over? If you guys do have a claim, the most important thing I can probably tell you is a lot of times when you talk to the claim folks on the phone, they'll say, take pictures of everything you throw out if you're mucking out your house. Don't throw anything out until the adjuster shows up. Because they need to see the quality of the carpeting that you're replacing, or the quality of the flooring that you had in, or how nice your couch was, or what the model of your refrigerator was, whatever it is. So don't throw things out. Set them outside, but don't throw them out. Uh-oh, did I lose? There we go. And then the other thing that I keep losing that I'll just talk this loud. I can talk loud. So the maximum amount of coverage that we have available through the NFIP is $250,000 for an individual home, and only $500,000 for commercial or other residential types of buildings, which isn't a whole lot for up here. There is excess flood coverage available, so you could buy our policy and get another policy stacked on top of it for the things that our policy doesn't cover. Or you can just look at private insurance. I already talked to one gentleman this evening who has a private policy. And there are a lot of good policies available in Colorado for private insurance, and they'll have a higher deductible. So there's more than one option. So if your house is worth more than $250,000, that might be something you want to consider, is to look at some of those other options. And then the last two things I really just wanted to cover are what our definition of a flood is, because I think a lot of people aren't familiar with it. And if you do buy private flood insurance, you want to know what that definition of a flood is, because that's one of the downsides that I've seen with the private policies, is their definition might be a little more narrow than us, and sometimes it's broader. So you need to know that, and if your agent doesn't know that, they need to get you a copy of the policy so you can read the language and understand it together. So the definition of a flood on our policy is the water has to travel over land and touch your building, and it needs to cross the property line. So, you know, in a neighborhood, that could be the street in your house. No other house could be affected, but as long as that water started in the street and flowed towards your house, that you meet the definition of a flood. In a more rural area, it's 2 continuous acres, okay? So that's the main definition. The one thing I'd like to let people know we don't tend to have this problem here is we don't cover seepage, which is when it just bubbles up through your drains in the basement, so the ground is just inundated, but you had no water traveling over land. That is not the definition of a flood by the NFIP, okay? Yes, and that's from any water source.
Can you explain the difference between a flood and debris flow?
Debris flow, so the way, and that was, thank you, the lead into my last point that I'd like to cover. Our policy does not cover mudslide, which we are, or I think the best visual is my old FEMA insurance specialist that I worked with, he described it as crumbling cake. So we don't cover crumbling cake, but we cover chocolate milk. And if that chocolate milk has chunks of debris in it, we'll cover that. But it's gotta be a flow, you know, it's gotta be liquid. So, do you guys remember that event that happened in, I think it was Snohomish, Washington, where that hillside gave out? It was horrible, right? All those people lost their life. Well, we didn't cover the landslide part, but when that water hit the river and crossed over and caused flooding on the other side of the river, we covered that. So that kind of gives you an idea of how that works. And again, some of the private policies will cover landslide. There's something called an all hazards policy that will cover earthquakes, mudslides, mud flow, flooding. That's another option. So you've kind of got more of a broad spectrum coverage. And I don't know, have you guys in your assessment, did they determine that landslide was a big concern?
The debris flow?
No, landslide. Are you concerned about landslide or more debris flow?
More debris flow.
Okay. So, you know, it all depends on your mountain. So like when the flooding happened in Boulder in 2013, that humongous event, Boulder did not have the big risk of debris or landslides, but they did have debris flow. So, yes.
I guess what's the definition of basement?
A definition of what?
Basement.
Ah,
Because we
the
didn't
fun
hear
one.
hillside.
Okay. So definition of a basement is below grade on all four sides and any amount of below grade. So you know how sometimes you have those sunken houses where the living room, you step down into the living room and it's below ground? Below ground, that's basement. I mean, I've seen it like a little itty bitty step down. I got a call from one of my big agents who writes for Allstate with Boulder. He said, "Is this a basement?" I'm like, "Yep, hate to tell you." And I sent that all the way to underwriting. And I mean, literally, it was that much of a step down. But because that little amount was below grade, it was a basement. So, yeah. And out here, we don't have them as much, but you know how you see like back east where they'll dig out for a garage, so the driveway will be dug out and it'll go underneath the house and then there's dirt on either side? That's a basement. So it's got to have a natural, if you have a walkout basement, you don't want any dirt on either side of you. You don't want a retaining wall that holds that water in and forces the water towards the foundation. I talked to a gentleman today, and they built like a natural berm in their backyard to keep the water from the small events from pushing towards their foundation. I'm like, it turns your backyard into a basement. Fortunately, he only had a crawl space and then a first living floor, so he didn't have a problem with that basement not being covered because of that. But I've had people in North Dakota and South Dakota not get paid, and their neighbor gets paid because the neighbor didn't build the berm. They caused the problem and forced it to the water towards their foundation. So it stops the small events, but in a big event, it holds it in. So, yes?
And it doesn't cover out and split.
It'll cover an attached garage, a detached garage, and you can write a separate policy on the other buildings that you've got if you want to. So, but you know, depending on the value of it, will cover up to 10% of a detached or an attached garage of your total value. So of the home. So if you have a policy for $250,000, that's only $25,000, and it needs to be a garage. So you can't have converted it into an apartment. It's got to be a garage. Any other questions? Okay. Turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. This microphone's having issues, so we'll move to the podium. Oh, I just put in another microphone.
Oh.
Something breaks, fix it, right? So thank you, Aaron. I'll stay up here for our panel later as well if you have questions. Our next presenter is Brett Loeb. Brett runs the Pitkin County Dispatch Center, which is the 911 safety entry point for everyone who lives in this area, including people in the Eagle County, Garfield County, and the Salt side. So welcome, Brett.
Not as tall as Birch. Best thing about being in a room full of public safety is there's always a plan B. So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm the director at the Pitkin County Dispatch Center, which also, I don't know how many people know, but your 911 dispatch center is also typically the ones responsible for sending out emergency notifications. So a lot of times we get all the 911 calls, we're dispatching all the fine public safety agencies at the same time we're trying to get all these messages out. What we found during the fire was we have a little bit of a problem here with, we've got 3 counties, and if this debris flow happens, when it happens, all 3 counties are probably going to be affected. And what we have found is we've kind of sectioned that off to 3 different notification systems, which created a problem during the fire. We overcame that quickly, and a lot of the notifications would go out of a Pitkin alert. We would copy up that exact language over to Eagle County, our dispatch center in Vail, and they would send it out to Eagle County. That worked, but it wasn't the most efficient way to get the information out. So when we started talking about this debris flow, what we have an opportunity here that you don't usually have, where you have an idea of where something might happen. So we started talking about, if this happens, what's the most efficient way to get that emergency messaging out to the public and the citizens affected. So we all decided that Pick and Alert would be the initial notification system. So that's why we're asking everybody, no matter which county you live in, to sign up for Pick and Alert. I encourage you always to sign up for the alert system in whatever county you live, for all other emergencies, but in this specific case, you're going to get the most efficient messaging through Pick and Alert. So how do those messages go out, just so you understand the process? We have opt-ins, we call them, so people that go to our website, pickandalert.org, sign up, give your whatever cell phone number, landline number, email. We can notify you in several different ways, and I encourage that because a lot of these are based on cell phone service. So if you live in an area without cell phone service, you might get the notification if you're at work or somewhere else, but you may not get it at home. No matter how we try to deliver it to you, if the cell phone service doesn't work, you're not going to get it. So if you have satellite internet, that's a great avenue. If you have landline, that's a great avenue. So we have a database of people that opt in. We also have a database of all landlines. Now, in our county and really across the nation, landlines are about 15% of 911 calls now. So that's not a very effective way to notify people, just basing it on landlines. And so all part of that is basically just we want to get as much information as we can. There's another method that we use called iPause. And what that does is actually broadcast out from the cell tower to a broad area. So every device that's within a certain distance from a cell tower will get that message. We want to use that only in extreme emergencies. We used it last year in the fire when the Up Valley, Aspen and Snowmass area was facing the potential threat of power outage for 3 days. So we sent that out, broadcast out, instead of directly targeting specific devices or numbers. That gets even more complicated because we're in a 3-county system. The way FEMA sets up that system is you can only broadcast within your county. So if we had to use an iPause message today, you would all receive 3 giant, annoying, if you've heard the Amber Alert come through, you would get 3 of those with all the same message. We're working with FEMA on that to allow us to send out an iPause to all 3 counties in this specific area with just 1 message. So I'm hoping that's going to get in place before we have to actually send one out. That's kind of the last ditch thing. That's the one that you also see will come over the TV and scroll over the bottom of the TV. All that stuff, we will have the capability to send it out. Now, like I said, this is a specific area, unlike a wildfire, that you don't know where it's going to go. You're going to contact as many people as you can. There's definite specific parts of this population that it will affect, and definite specific parts that it won't. So we're saving iPause and the big alert systems for if something really big happens that affects a large area. So with the advantage of having these specific areas, we've identified a lot of the addresses: Cattle Creek, Wilson Basalt, Eligible Trailer Park, Tree Farm, those areas, and we've checked and cross-referenced all our databases, and we've identified those that don't have any way to notify them, and we're reaching out to them to contact them. One other opportunity that let me back up. What's going to happen? We're encouraging everybody to sign up for Pick and Alert, and within Pick and Alert, you can sign up for National Weather Service notifications. That, again, is going to be the most efficient way to get that messaging to you. We're not going to take it in the comm center and then redistribute it back out. You need to sign up for weather watches and warnings. So what's going to happen is it's going to come directly from the National Weather Service. You're going to get an alert. A watch is conditions are looking like they will exist in the near future to cause an event. A warning is the conditions do exist at this moment to cause an event. And those conditions are determined by the National Weather Service in conjunction with all the experts. So when those thresholds are met, a warning goes out. That means it is imminent, it is likely. If you get that warning, the next one that you're going to get is when we get visual confirmation from our people on the ground, there is debris flow, there is flooding, it's happening. And if it's happening in Basalt, it's probably already happening in Basalt. So that National Weather Service warning, the warning, is the one that we really want you to pay attention to and really sign up for. There's all different kinds of ways you can do it through all kinds of apps. The most efficient one for you would be through Pick and Alert. There's a whole weather section. Sign up for floods, flash floods, watches, and warnings. One last thing that we were offering, because these notifications get tricky. You don't want to send out too many, have people get upset, just turn them off, but you want all the information to go out. So we've set up a keyword, we call it LC flood, Lake Christine flood. If you text that to 888-777, we'll know that you want as much information as possible about that. So we'll be free with that information, more than we would through our public notification system. So those are kind of the key points to think about there.
Can you say that one more time, a little slower so people can
Yeah. LC, Lake Christine, flood, all one word, no spaces. And you want to text that to 888-777.
And then still sign up for Pick and Alert?
Yes, so this will give you only text.
So in the text messages that are going out, either through the National Weather Service or through Pickett County, are those only in English? Is there a way to have that signed up for in Spanish?
I don't know through the Weather Service. We offer emergency alerts in Spanish through Pick and Alert, but since we don't convert the message from the Weather Service, I don't know if they offer that translation, I'm sorry.
And so the LC flood, texting that word to this number, this 888-777, those alerts are going to come out in English, or those would be translated as well, maybe?
We've committed since the fire to sending out all emergency messages in both English and Spanish. So yes, with that LC flood, it will contain, it'll either contain or it'll come out in a separate message in Spanish. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Brett. I'm happy to introduce next Valerie McDonald, Emergency Manager for Pitkin County, who's going to talk about some steps you can take to ensure that if something were to happen, that you can keep yourself and your family safe. Thank you.
Valerie McDonald, Pitkin County Emergency Management. There's a good reason why Pitkin, Eagle, and Garfield are working together in this. There's no disaster that can happen in this valley that we all wouldn't be working together and everyone wouldn't be impacted. Our best chance of getting through any disaster emergency in this valley is if our citizens are aware and prepared to take action. So I just have some basic emergency preparedness information we'd like to share on behalf of all three counties. Brett and Chief Thompson just talked about the importance of signing up to get the emergency notification alerts. We know if we can warn you, the end result will be better. Other ways to stay informed, coming to meetings like this. Thank you all so much for being here, but there's also other avenues as well. Pay attention to the local TV, radio, local media outlets. Our local media outlets are great public safety partners with us. There might only be 40 of you in the room, but I know there are several reporters here as well, and they will help us spread the word to the rest of the people who are in the backyard having a beer. So thank you so much for showing up tonight. That said, I wanted to mention also, since we're specifically talking about debris flows and flash flooding, weather radios, battery-powered weather radios are a good option right now as well. All that said, natural disasters don't always give us advanced warning. You need to rely on your instincts and situational awareness as well. If your gut instincts are telling you need to take action, you do not have to wait for that pick and alert. Leave. You don't have to get the alert that a debris flow is happening. So leave early if possible. So just some basic preparedness tips. How do you prepare? Everyone needs to have an emergency plan. What would you do? Ask yourself this question. Go home and discuss this with your family. What would you do if you picked up the phone and you got a message saying, evacuate immediately? Could you do that? It's doesn't matter if it's in the day. To me, it seems it would be worse in the night. Natural reaction for most people in a situation like that is to stall out, to freeze and wait for the situation to normalize. Not a good option in a fast-moving disaster. It's very chaotic. It's very frightening, especially if you have kids. We're so fortunate to have such highly trained professional public safety agencies, first response agencies in this valley, but I don't want to sugarcoat this. During the high season in this valley, we have 40,000 people. We have a few hundred public safety agencies that can't get to everyone at once, especially in the beginning of a quickly evolving situation. It's just not a good ratio. I mean, they will get to you. It could be 3 hours, it could be 3 days. So it's important that everyone take personal responsibility and have an emergency plan so that you can take action quickly. We'd like everyone to pay attention to the alerts, as we all said. Be aware of possible evacuation routes. Have a 72-hour emergency go kit, and have a family communication plan and a pet plan. Most importantly, practice it with your group. We want to create some muscle memory around this so you can get out quickly. Talk with your support group meaning family, friends, neighbors. So the support groups are vitally important. Everybody needs to work together on their emergency plans. Everybody's going to need help. The one example that gets to me is if you're at work and your kids are at home, your pets are at home, you get an alert on your phone that there's an evacuation of your area, but you're not home, you can't get to your kids and your pets. So talk to your neighbors, help each other, make these plans in advance. Things will go much more smoothly. If anybody in your group has special needs, it's even more important. I mean, it's difficult enough for an able-bodied person to pull the trigger and do this really quickly. Anybody that needs, by special needs, I pretty much mean anyone that's going to take extra time. I want to add on to something Brett was talking about Pick an Alert. When you sign up on Pick an Alert, there's a menu. You don't have to get all the notifications about 69 different things, but you can sign up. You can identify yourself as having a special need. There's actually a menu you can choose from. Do you have mobility issues, vision issues, cognitive issues, whatever it might be, you can check that box. So during an incident, the incident commander can call dispatch and say, I need that list right now. They'll pull it. We at least know that you're there. Again, no guarantee that will get you right away in the beginning of an incident, but we know who you are and we will get to you eventually. But it's just even more important that people in special needs do advanced planning. I've been asked to talk specifically about a 72-hour emergency go bag. Chances are, again, in the beginning of an incident, you're not going to remember what to take. It's just fast moving, it's scary. So have your bag packed, think it through. I know some of you are thinking you're just going to hop in your car and drive until you can get to services or hop on a plane or whatever it is, but maybe we're talking about worst case scenario here. And we really need everyone to plan to be self-sufficient for 72 hours. There are some basic universal needs that apply to everybody. Food, water, clothing. But give some hard thought, think this through, because you won't. The 3 minutes you've got to get out the door. What are your personal essential needs? What can't you or your family live without? Do you have medicines, medical equipment? Everybody's kit is going to be a little bit different. I put handouts in the back. I didn't want to read a long list to you. There's plans back there for a family communication plan, plan for your pets, and plans for everybody in their Go kit. And then also online at ready.gov/make-a-kit. There's just a wealth of information, but they're in the back as well. Just a couple other things to think about. I'm talking about a go bag. What I picture is I'm running out the door and my go bag is like right there, and I just grab it and I get in my car and I take off. But especially in this debris flow situation, it could be different. You could have a debris flow and the road to your house is cut off, so you can't leave your house. Do you have enough of what you need in your house? Or the flip side of that is, most people spend probably a third of their time away from their home. So for example, if you're at work and you get that notice, and your road's cut off, you can't get back up there. So do you have what you need with you? Just the essentials. So I'll just go through a few of the things that I thought was important, but again, you might think something else is important. So prescriptions, medications, glasses, medical equipment, all your important documents, insurance, policies, car titles, passport, mortgage docs, bank info, keep them in a waterproof container. That would be ideal. Pictures or videos of your home and valuables, Aaron touched on that. And even most ideally, back it up on your computer or have a flash drive and put it in the cloud. This is an important one that I think people don't always think about, cash. We know, especially after last summer, how vulnerable we are to power outages. During a disaster where we had no power, ATM machines wouldn't work, or credit card machines, so you need cash. First aid supplies, flashlights, batteries, personal hygiene items, clothes. And I want to mention this one, like family heirlooms. Aaron mentioned it, the really valuable mementos and things that, are irreplaceable. That one's a little trickier because you don't want to have them in a bag or the tub by your front door. The picture could be hanging on the wall, you could be wearing the jewelry. So at the very least, have that list of what you want to grab in your go bag. In this time of really heightened awareness of this debris flow since the fire, that federal team that came in here said we're at increased risk for 5 years for debris flow. So if there's something that you just really can't even stand the thought of losing, I would take it out of your house if you're in a high risk area, at least for this time. I'll stop there, but I'll be around for questions, and again, those handouts are in the back. Thank you. Birch?
Thank you, Valerie. So I want to touch on 2 additional things before we get to our panel here. One of which is we talked a lot about alert and warning, right? Our ideal scenario is that nothing happens. If something does happen, our ideal scenario is that you're prepared, you've taken steps to make sure that the water is moving away from your homes, you've taken steps to make sure that if you do lose something, that you're able to keep yourself and your families safe and secure, and that you're able to reimburse those costs through insurance and other mechanisms. We are in a unique area here as far as alert and warning. Because of the mountainous area, the radar in Grand Junction is not as bad as in some areas, but it's not perfect at assessing where the rain is falling on the mountain. And we know that sending out alerts that aren't effective is the best way to get people to unsubscribe from alerts. So we are working very closely with the National Weather Service to try to make sure that they are measuring that effectively. That being said, when you get that alert that says flash flood warning imminent, please take shelter, or please seek higher ground. Please make sure that that alert is not just an informational alert so that you can tell all your friends something big is happening. It means nothing to send out that alert if people don't take action. I lived in the Midwest for a long time. I've been in glass-walled buildings and seen those tornado alerts come out to say, tornado warning, take shelter immediately, and watch everybody kind of look up and look around and then go back to eating their noodles because nobody took initiative. You, by being here today, are now the people that I hope will take initiative if you get that warning. Even if you're not sure what it means, take some steps so that if something happens, and tell the people around you, I was in a meeting, this guy just went on and on about all these bright red risk areas, but we should probably go upstairs, or we should probably stay off the roads for a little while, cancel that plan we had. Because if it keeps you safe, it was worth every cent of investment that we put into it on our end. The second piece I'm going to talk about, it's not the focus of the conversation today, but we know if you go outside and look at some of the rivers that we are getting pretty close to action stage on some of our rivers. I've been told by the National Weather Service that those rivers are expected to hit their annual peak in the next few days. So we don't expect them to continue growing and growing through the next several weeks. My best guess based on the forecast from the National Weather Service are that they will hit their peaks, and I'm talking about both the Roaring Fork, Frying Pan, as well as the Eagle River Valley. They will hit their peaks and hopefully not reach minor flood stage even. However, that being said, we do want people to be aware of how they can check what water levels are, what they're forecasted to be. On our website, eaglecounty.us/flood planning, we have all the resources to the stream gauges and river gauges, as well as resources for flood insurance, resources for how to build sandbag walls. We do have sand and shovels and bags readily available for public access, available here in El Jebel, as well as in other sides of our county. And we just want to know that there is information available. The best thing we can ask you to do is inform yourself on what the risk is, look around yourself, and take reasonable steps given your situation to keep yourself prepared. So with that, I want to introduce our panel. You've met most of them. You met Valerie. Again, I'll go through the whole list so you remember who everyone is here. Brett's from the Pitkin County Dispatch Center. Valerie from Pitkin County Emergency Management. Eric from FEMA Flood Insurance. Sheriff James Van Beek is here to talk as the public safety individual for the County of Eagle. Brian Mahoney, Town Manager for Town of Basalt. Chief Greg Knott is Police Chief for Town of Basalt, and Scott Thompson is the Fire Chief for Roaring Fork Rescue. So I might give just 2 minutes in case Chief Knott and Sheriff Van Beek want to say something, and then we can turn it over to questions from the team. Chief Knott? Okay. Sheriff Van Beek? Wonderful. Any questions for Van? Yes, ma'am.
Real quick, I'm going to apologize that this is not a true question, but I'm Kristen. I work for Roaring Fork Conservancy. If you have your flood insurance and you're prepared and you've signed up for all these alerts and you feel like you're not doing enough, you want to come help us. This coming Saturday, we're doing a restoration project with Roaring Fork Valley Outdoor Volunteers to reseed some areas. So if you want to participate in that, that's available. And then also, it is in no way a emergency alert type of report, but we do have a weekly report on snowpack and river flows in the Roaring Fork watershed. If you just want your 10-minute synopsis of what those things are doing and how it might relate to some of the things that our awesome counties and municipalities are doing. So thank you all for being here, and thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. The Roaring Fork Conservancy has been a full partner at all of our planning meetings and is working very closely with all of the entities up here as well. So thank you for the work you're doing. Yes, sir.
I have one thing I think that maybe is going to be off this year. I don't think we're going to reach high water in about a week. I think it's going to be a lot longer than that before we get to high water. Did anybody ever look at Mount Socus and see how much snow is up there? And that translates to water. And we've had some cold weather. I don't think we've seen high water yet.
Along those lines, we have weekly calls with all the emergency managers across the state, National Weather Service, law enforcement, fire departments, trying to figure that out. And you're correct, it's a moving target, because our weather patterns have been warm, and then it cools off at night. We'll get a few days of cool, we'll get cloud cover, we'll get
It's
some
slow
snow.
melting off.
So we're trying to pinpoint that, but it's not an exact science.
So the last forecast we saw pushed it up till right around the 17th of June. The fire department usually does their swiftwater clearing the first week in June, because historically that's our high water. We got beat up in low water the first week in June. So it's at least 2 weeks later right now.
Yeah, all I can speak to that is that we are just trusting the experts who look at the snowpack, and it will be high, and there will be a lot of water coming into these rivers for a long time. Our hope is that their forecast is correct, and that we will reach our peak at some point this week. Yes, additional questions, sir?
Maybe Ryan, some of the areas that aren't shown, either the red or dark red, are highly populated. There's a burg where my house is, on the east side of the frying pan, in Elk Run or Riverside or the schools. How much risk do you think exists in those areas?
Well, sorry, I'll try not to yell into the microphone. Those were not identified by the NRCS as being at risk. And I guess what I would say is, if you think about the geography or topography in Elk Run, it would have to come off of the mountain, cross the street, and then cross the river, and then, kind of go over into those areas if it was to come off of Basalt Mountain. We have not been doing much in that area as alerting folks, but, I don't think that's a call to let your guard down nonetheless, certainly.
So this map is available. We've given you so many phone numbers and web addresses verbally through our microphone. But if you Google, the best way is Google USGS flood debris Lake Christine, and you'll go to the USGS site with this map. Did you have anything else?
I was just going to say, because we don't know where a debris flow would come down, and I think one thing for Elk Run or some of those areas there is what happens on the frying pan, and are they having to do more releases out of there, keep notching up those flows to basically keep the dam intact and get the water downstream. I think there are some properties along there that at about 1,900 CFS start to get dangerously close to flooding. And then if a big debris flow came down and for some reason blocked the river, the frying pan, you could get some damming back behind there, and then it could release. But until we know or see what happens, because there are some areas, as I believe Chief Thompson pointed out, on the frying pan where you could get debris flows over there. So.
It's a really good question. I would encourage the map that USGS puts out has more than the red and maroon areas, so you can see on the burn scar the various levels of risk for areas outside of just what's up there. I would encourage people to recognize that their image is limited to the area that was actually burned. That does not mean that those debris flows will stop right at the burn line. We expect them to go quite a ways below that. So especially if you're living on the eastern side of Frying Pan up there, recognizing and taking to heart the true likelihood that you could not be directly impacted, but that road could be cut off. We believe we can get it open again in 1 to 2 days, relatively quickly, but if you're relying on medications or durable medical equipment or things that will cause your family to have strain in a short cutoff from the rest of the community, please recognize that that area, even if it doesn't hit you, may impact your ability to access the rest of the community.
There was one in the very back. Did you have something, sir? You kept raising your hand and then you gave up.
Yeah, I would just like to comment with the gentleman here about floods. That historically, the biggest floods on the Roaring Fork have occurred in the last week of June. So I've seen them happen the very last day of June. So just keep that in mind.
I'd like to add something to what Ryan brought up and to your point as well. I mean, we high water, we're not unfamiliar with high water, but we have dams. We have Rudai Reservoir, we have Grizzly Reservoir up above the Roaring Fork, and we are in constant communication. We have weekly calls with them. They keep us apprised of operations and releases. Doesn't mean we can stop it, but we can warn people, but that's a huge variable.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm confused, like, if you get a warning that a debris flow is imminent, and how should you react? If you're under the burn scar, or like if you're in Elgibel on the street down here shopping, we went to one of the weather meetings, and they said those move very quickly. So if somebody's saying, oh my gosh, there's a debris flow, a flood is different. Like,
right.
You don't want to stay in your house up on the South Mountains, right? For debris flow, you would get in your car and leave. Like, that's very confusing.
It is, and I had this conversation with the public information team over and over again. I don't think that warnings without specific action steps get followed very often. And I would love to be able to put something that says, flash flood warning, debris flow warning, do X, Y, or Z. The truth is, we need people to look at their surroundings and the people there and say, if I got this, what would I do? Because in some areas, in a lot of areas, the amount of water we're expecting is probably not enough to wash an entire house away. And if you get upstairs, you may be safest. However, we visited some homes where they're pretty lightweight homes right in an area where water could come, and those individuals telling them to shelter in place would be the worst thing we could possibly do. Our goal from an alert and warning sign side is not to give you an alert when water is moving, it's to give you an alert when the level and intensity of rainfall meet a threshold that we believe it could be happening soon. We hope that that gives people at least 25 to 30 minutes of lead time, but with what we're looking at, what we're really concerned with this debris flow risk is not the same type of flood conditions that we're looking at now. The concern is really going to be mid to late July and early August when we have that high intensity rain in a short period of time. Yes? Yeah.
I'd just like to add, she had mentioned the weather alarms. In 2013, when Manitou Springs had the fire and we lost like the 300 homes. I don't know if any of you guys have been down to Manitou Springs, but that downtown area, it moves fast and furiously. And it saved lives to have those because it alarms in the middle of the night and it's loud. And they only cost like $40. You can buy them on Amazon, you can go to the hardware stores, I think, or Walmart, they've got them. So it's smart to have in your home, especially for those nighttime events, which they have a ton of. And in their situation, I think they only needed like a quarter inch of rain to set that alarm off. That's how fast the water was going to flow off that mountain. I don't know what your standard is for that. But people got tired of that alert, they complained about it, but they knew they were lives. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than sending out too many alerts and having people unsubscribe and not get the message they need, except for, I was emergency manager in a county in Maryland, and we had an incredibly rapid growing flood, and people were sitting in the upper stories of restaurants getting away from the water, and then they get an alert, and that's not okay, right? So we need to set that threshold as sensitive as we can to let you know when we believe it would be wise to take action. But you really, just by being here today and thinking about it, you will be safer when something comes. But go home and ask yourself those questions. It is confusing, I agree, and if anybody has a great solution, for how to communicate that message effectively, please come talk to me, because I'd love to.
If I can add in here real quick, I think to answer somewhat of your question, you have Chief Thompson, you have Eric Lundgren, you've got a lot of other ones. Eric Lundgren works for the county, wildfire specialist, that type of stuff, even Burge. If you actually reach out to them and you're worried about your home because you don't know, because it's going to be up to you to make that decision. But to get a more educated one, reach out to them and say, listen, can somebody come up here, explain exactly how my house fits in here, and what's going to be, what you would recommend as my best option, so then you can start planning ahead. And they will tell you, like Birch was talking about, if you're right in the flow, if we're telling you something's coming in, you want to get out of there. There may be other ones that said, no, the flow's going to most likely hit a little ways down below you, so you're probably better off staying where you're at because you don't want to drive through it. So I think that ultimately it's going to be the individual making the decision, but you do have resources that you can reach out to get those answers.
Who do we ask specifically about that?
Yeah, who? What resources? Right there.
Which one of you do we talk to?
Yeah.
I would probably start with Chief Thompson, Scott. He'd probably be the first one to reach out to, and if it's outside of his specialty, he can reach out to the other ones who have specialty. We can go through Valerie, find out who we have. We can go through Eagle County, and if you're worried about the wildfire mitigation, and how to prevent some of that, we have Eric Lundgren, who works with Eagle County. He loves to come out. They'll come out and do these things. But either my office, but most likely Scott Thompson and Chief Thompson, and we're going to go through the fire department and work your way that way.
It's going to be a different person if you live in one part of the county, but if you talk to any of us and tell us what you're looking to get to, we know.
And I just wanted to say two quick things. One, I forgot to mention, any agent can write an NFIP policy. So if your homeowners is with Allstate or American Family or State Farm or, whatever, they're all capable of writing our FEMA policy. If you're looking at a private policy because you want to have more coverage than the max that we've got available for residential, go to one of the bigger commercial agencies in town. There's several in the area, and they've all got, we came up here and trained the agents and went out and called on them individually. So they've all got our business card. If they have questions or unusual circumstances, they know how to get a hold of us. So,
thank you.
and then the only other thing I was going to say is, you guys, if you haven't taken advantage of this grant that they've made available to help mitigate your homes, do. I mean, it is, number one, I just want to say congratulations to them for getting this done. I think it's the first community I've seen where they have grant monies to help you guys protect your home in advance. And I've seen what happens firsthand, like down in Durango last summer. We had homes where the road was the floodway, in a big event. And it was this, small dirt road, and the house that was on the turn just got devastated because the water goes straight. So once it hit the turn, it didn't follow the road. It just went straight through their backyard, and they had boulders the size of Toyota RAV4s sitting in their backyard. So they eventually came out and put in those cement stanchions to kind of block so the water would stay on the road past those houses on the curb. So, those are the things that you want to be talking to these guys about and what you can do in advance to protect your home. The same thing happened in Manitou Springs, but they had to come up with that money themselves. So this is here, and it is really rare, and they've gone out of their way to make this money available to you, so don't pass it up.
Thank you. Ma'am, did you have?
Yes, so first of all, make you feel a little better, I represent the whole street. And so I just hold the whole line for sure. So we're further down, we're about 3 miles down from here. So are we expecting the degree flow to affect that far down? Is that a yes? Because our neighborhood, we're all about clearing our secondary channel right now, setting out willows, we're doing all this stuff.
So this could affect the water quality in Grand Junction. But the fact is that Cattle Creek empties at Cattle Creek on Highway 82, a long way down. And I'm concerned that debris will make it to that point. So this is, that could affect all of us. Our commerce, our grocery stores. If we wash out Highway 82 because of a catastrophic failure at Cattle Creek, we're all in trouble.
But are we expecting it to come down this way as well?
You're talking the Roaring Fork drainage, aren't you?
Roaring Fork.
It could, yes, or it could get to the Roaring Fork from Calgary. We don't know. All these possibilities, it could affect the frying pan, it could affect the Roaring Fork.
I guess I answered somewhat of your question. You talked about some of the high-risk areas. The highest risk area that we have of massive slides and flooding is going to be on Cattle Creek.
Okay.
So that's going to be that's the highest. That doesn't mean that it can't happen going down and dropping into the frying pan. It doesn't mean it can't come off the front or that it can't come over on the other bell side. But the highest risk right now is on the backside and in the Cattle Creek. The Cattle Creek drainage is the most. And so if it hits there, then it's going to cover a lot farther.
At this point, I'm talking right, I'm disappointed because it's right behind us, literally. So at this point, that is a consideration.
It's a possibility, but that's probably much more remote than somebody else.
And, just to keep in mind, it all depends on the size of the event, right, as to how far it goes. I mean, looking at the event that happened in 2013, all those rains that we had like, what was it? It was over 32 inches of rain in 3 days. And that water, you would have thought downtown and the canyon areas west of Boulder would have been just hammered. It was east of downtown Boulder. It was on the other side of Highway 36. That water went out and flattened out and spread out. I mean, all those little ranch, and the closer you were to a highway, that water held it in. I mean, there were some of those ranch homes that had 6 and 8 feet of water in their house. So, and that water went all the way to, Sterling and Fort Morgan, and it just kept going. So, there were parts of that event that were 1,000-year flood up north of Fort Collins, and some that were 100-year, and some that were 500-year. So, it just depends on what you get. That was a monsoon or late fall event. It's very different than the spring round.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Cattle Creek, we live on Lower Cattle Creek, if you're worried about 82, so is there any time estimate, if there's a microburst at the headwaters, when would we get down to 82? And my other part is I live just above 112 Road, and the county has a nice culvert where all the trash is gonna hit. Garfield isn't here, would they put one of these trash racks there or anything? I mean, how much time do I have, and is the county gonna do anything?
So there's two pieces there, and I'm hearing it loud and clear because I've asked the same thing. What does this mean, right? If this is on the burn scar, this is going to slide, how far is it going to go? How destructive is it going to be? How much water and soil are we talking about moving? And what we don't have is a good assessment of that. We've had serious discussions about whether we bring in consultants. It's really hard to spend money that could be spent on actual mitigation activities, doing assessments that may take years to come to a result, and by which point we've missed the highest risk period of time. The one thing that everybody's told us is, look, even if you do an assessment, it's not going to be predictive because we can't simulate every possible scenario that can happen. What we do know is what's up there is the likelihood that those areas will experience some flood or debris flow with the annual high rainstorm of any given year. So that's based on the annual high volume intensity rainstorm of any given year. That's what we call a 1-year rain event. What we know is that that is only going to look worse if we see a 5-year high rain event or a 10-year high rain event. And we combine that with the fact that our historical records that give us an estimate for how many years it might be between events are completely inaccurate at this point. This is coming from a community that experienced 2 1,000-year rain events in 2 years. So all we can do right now with what we have is say, imagine what could happen and try to take reasonable steps to prepare ourselves if something does trickle down far beyond those areas.
So the other point I want to make is Garfield County has been in planning efforts with us. They are on board to help us. Carbondale Fire is part of it in Garfield County. They're here. Garfield Road and Bridge and the Garfield Emergency Management has been with us every step of the way since we identified that that's a problem. So yes, Garfield County is here.
Is there grant money available in Garfield County for flood mitigation?
So I can take a crack at that. the grant money that we received, which is the emergency watershed protection money, though that money was tied to specific properties that were identified after the fire. And so those property owners have been called. And so if you weren't part of that, then your property wasn't identified as sort of in that a line of flow for a debris flow or a flood coming off of the mountain. That doesn't mean that you can't be affected by it, but just the way that these grants work, and I'm fairly new to working with these grants, is there's just specific properties that are identified. No. And there are. What I don't know is if we get to a point where we're done with the projects that were initially identified, if there's money that's left over. But you had brought up about a culvert, and what's the there's no trash rack on that culvert. Well, the one thing is if it's a fairly small debris flow, a trash rack will do will help in that situation. But if it's a larger debris flow, it's just going to overwhelm that culvert. And I've found out just in the recent weeks that NRCS money does not cover the installation of new culverts. So you can't increase the size of the culvert with that money to try to mitigate for a different size flood. And also when you're replacing a culvert, and you may know this already, so excuse me if I'm speaking out of turn, but the minute you try to upsize it, lots of the culverts that we have around the county, they don't have a lot of cover on them. And so then you're having to dig out and resize, the trench or what have you coming in and chasing that back up river. So it just gets more costly and time consuming in that way. So, not the answer I think you want to hear, but that's just some of the information that I've learned recently.
Okay, thank you.
Can I talk just a
Absolutely, yeah.
about Cattle Creek? Since we seem to have some Garfield folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
My name's Rob Goodwin, I'm the fire chief for the Carbondale Fire District. How many people live in Garfield, Kim? Hey! Well, we've been part of the team that's been creating this plan and the information project, and we've actually, Brett and many of us have toured the whole site up into Cattle Creek and then all the way down to 82. I've done it myself about 5 times. And one of the things we've identified for the flow, the thing that we're worried about is where 113 meets 100 road, right? And right below Turnberry Ranch or the old Full Throttle Ranch. And so one of the things we've been trying to do for notification, it's such a hard thing to get your mind around when you're up there. You look up on the Salt Mountain and go, oh my God, it's up here, and then how does it get all the way down here? I think it can, the worst case scenario. So one of the things that we keyed on is, that canyon comes really close together right there at 100 and 113, and then Cattle Creek does kind of precipitous 6-mile run down to Highway 82 in that pretty narrow canyon. So we've been in contact with a number of homeowners about Full Throttle and McNulty's and places like that, and we'll be using them as one tool for lookouts. If they see water starting to back up there, they're going to call 911 hopefully and notify us, and hopefully that'll give us a little time for that, especially the lower Cattle Creek part where the velocity of this flow is going to increase and all the people are. So I think the biggest thing we've come up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is this water and debris flow coming down into Cattle Creek, hitting a culvert or something like that, like up on Upper Cattle Creek Road, backing up and then breaking loose, go down to somewhere around McNulty's or Full Throttle, doing the same thing again and then breaking loose and finally making its way to that big culvert at 100 and 113. we put our wildland and seasonal patrols, they patrol that virtually every day during the day, so that's another piece of it. And again, we've been working with Garfield County and County Sheriff's Office as well. And our plan is that if we believe that something potentially is happening, we'll send lookouts up to the full throttle area, things like that, to try to track this before it makes it right into Cattle Creek, and it's the oh my God moment. And it's the best thing we know to do now, because we don't know what form it's going to take, and we don't know exactly where it's going to go. But we do have a plan in place, and Pickett Alert, we decided this with Garfield County is really just the fastest way for you to get notified. You will eventually get notified with Garfield County, but coming from the National Weather Service to Pitkin, having those dispatchers contact Garfield, it could, and then on down the line, that all works, but it takes time. And we believe that if we have a water flow event or a debris flow event, we want to shorten that and take the minutes that it takes for a very busy dispatch center at that point in Aspen to get a hold of Garfield to get those messages out. So Pitkin Alert really is it. And LC Flood to 8777 are going to be great notification tools. Okay? Does that make a little more sense? All right.
Thank you, Chief. There's another question right there. Yes, ma'am.
Is that list public information, the items that you've identified as being the most at risk?
I don't see why not. Yeah, I mean, it's one that we've been working with, and I think all of several of the public have been notified
I was
about
just
it. So.
thinking that you probably don't want to sit here and answer where every person lives and what the risks are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you knew where those places were, I think that map is pretty confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it might be easy for us to like Google an address and go, okay, I'm right next door, or I'm over here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's helpful.
Well, one thing we want to be a little cautious of is just because you are next door to somebody, or if you're, down the block, you may be completely out of the way of a debris flow. And so if I guess we wouldn't want to cause alarm that all of a sudden because, somebody near you, and we have those examples in the town of Basalt as we're coming down that drainage. I mean, there are some neighbors that are adjacent and they're out of the way. The interesting thing about the town of Basalt identified floodway above the Bassburg there is the area that is draining that could potentially cause that is a pretty isolated drainage. It's fairly small. It's less than 0.2 of a square mile, and so that at least is favorable. And there's some good undulation up above, and I think that's why we're really targeting the top to really be the saving grace for much of what could otherwise come down.
So if we're nervous, we should ask the fire department?
Yeah, you can ask the fire department, or if you're so inclined, you can always call me at the town hall. I'm pretty easy to find, so, yeah.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question building on that. So if you've notified the property owners or the landowners who are in the higher risk, I own my home, but it's in the Elgin Mobile Park, and they won't let me buy that land. So, and that's in a high-risk area, correct? So have you notified the little home park who is at risk, or have you notified those of us who live there?
I wouldn't consider Elk Mobile Home Park in a very high risk area.
You would not? Okay.
It's gonna flow away
Okay.
from the park.
Uh-huh.
Tree farm is much more likely.
Okay.
Or coming down Blue Creek, in to the edge of the trailer park,
Mm-hmm.
but more into the elk field, would be a concern.
Okay.
But the actual park, if you look at it, there's a nice hill between it and Basalt Mountain. And so it'll keep the debris flow from coming down there. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not gonna be small little debris, like what happened in Tree Farm, but nothing disastrous in the trailer park.
Although, please keep in mind again that you could be impacted if it is large enough in an area next to you and you're cut off from other services.
Extrapolated.
Yeah, really, this map, when you do go to the USGS site, is, you can zoom in, you can get down to the street level and you can see where your home is. And then if you can't understand it from there, the best thing to do really is to call your public safety official. We can tell you what we've looked at through that side of things.
And Birch, just as
Yeah.
one last note, I mean, the one thing that I think you guys just need to be aware of statistically is that we're seeing increases in claims for people who are in low-risk flood zones. So those of you who are near the burn scar, you know, on the map for flood insurance, you may not be considered to be in a high-risk flood zone, so your premiums could be $500 to $600 a year for peace of mind. And that's worth it until you get several years out from this fire. And like in the 2013 event, I would say about 35% of our claims were for people who were in low-risk flood zones, not high-risk flood zones, because of the fire. So keep that in mind, and hopefully I've convinced a few of you to pick up and call your agent. But the other thing to keep in mind is we have a 30-day waiting period, and most of the private policies do too. So don't put this at the bottom of your to-do list. You know, the worst stories I hear are from people, and I've had these calls where they bought the policy a little too late and they missed their 30-day waiting period by 3 days. You know, it kills me.
Sir?
I was looking at the map and we did it the Wyatt, and I was trying to determine, but couldn't pinpoint it on that map. Can you help me with that?
The Wilds wasn't one of the properties identified. Yeah, you're a little further away and sort of out of harm's way, really, as far as with the map.
But you could easily lose access.
Yeah.
Because you have two stream areas on both sides.
On both sides,
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. There were two drainages that went on either side and kind of sat up a little bit.
Thank you. I thought there was a question back here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what would be, I guess I've heard a few of you allude to a time frame on these possible disasters. I mean, what's the time frame? 5, 10, 15 years from now? Is it still going to be a major issue, or as things grow back, as we get planning?
Usually, I guess the rule of thumb that I've heard is 5 to 7 years after a fire, you're at increased risk for debris flows.
FEMA says 10.
FEMA says 10.
And there have been some 20 years after.
So if you were going to buy flood insurance, you should expect to own it for 5, 10, 20 years?
No, I wouldn't say 20. I mean,
10 years?
you know, you guys remember how badly Ward got hit in 2013? They were in their 10th year after a fire. So, and that was not a huge fire. I mean, it wasn't even one I remember. But, you know, they had catastrophic losses. People didn't just lose their home, they lost their entire land into the river.
So my understanding, this is again very new territory for me as well. But in that first year, what you're seeing is that the soil becomes hydrophobic. It essentially gets a turpentine layer, which is what Chief Thompson was talking about, where the water actually falls and then beads up. That breaks down over the first year or so. But then what happens is that that soil is much more soluble. It's not just that there's lack of ground cover, because in some areas you can look up and the grass is growing nicely and think that you're okay. Really, that first 1 to 3 years are absolutely critical risk for us. And then we look 5 to 7 out as still concerning priorities, but we don't want people to feel like that means we're telling them there's no risk up to 10 or 20 years afterwards. So if you're looking at cost benefit of insurance programs, for example, I would absolutely focus on those first 3 years up to 5 years, and then really let's continue this conversation and look back at what the burn scar looks like, how growth has occurred, and then try to make an intelligent decision based on that.
And really, within those years, it's going to depend on the snowpack. You know, if we have a light snowpack, then maybe, even in the first 3 years, it's not something you necessarily need to consider. But, I look at that weird 2013 event, and what happened in like the last day in September, and it was 30 plus inches. So all it takes is one of those events. They keep saying that these you know, global warming, these events are gonna be more dramatic, you know, so we have to.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, what do you see for the Blue Lake area with the Blue Creek and then the lake right there and then the big mountain behind? The Blue Lake area.
Once again, as far as the Blue Lake neighborhood, as far as debris flows, hitting homes, we're not seeing a very high risk at all. Chief, you mentioned Blue Creek before, did you
Yeah,
see?
that leads into Blue Lake, so there is a possibility, not to the extent of some areas, but we could have that debris build up, wash loose, go to the next place. The good thing about Blue Lake, the Elgin, the outfield, is it's flat and open, so that water's gonna disperse and won't pack into one canyon or one culvert, so, it makes it less of a problem.
Ma'am, any questions?
I was just curious, if there is a loss of life, these sound like pretty serious consequences for Old Town Basalt. Would there be further criminal charges against the arsonists?
Good question.
Not touching that one.
Looks like it's just a question.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people involved in this conversation. I think the people that can answer that question have not been. Yeah. Our job is to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent that occasion, and if it does happen, we would all take it very seriously.
Thank you.
Man in the back.
Yeah, I'm from Carbondale, I'm one of the trustees, and I'm really glad that the fire chief is here. I wanted to ask you guys if your team has reached out to the town of Carbondale for support services, should there be an event that you need help with?
As for them to support us?
Yeah,
No, we're in constant communication with agencies up and down the valley.
okay,
So, at the fire, Carbondale was right there with us.
right.
No, thank you for your support, thank you for that offer, and we do utilize, just as if something happened on the Crystal. So with the flooding, we built an incident action plan, a response plan, and stood up an IMT, incident management team, so that if an event happens on the Crystal, this team that we've created will be there to support you guys too.
Oh, got it.
So it's throughout the valley, from Aspen all the way down into Garfield County, where we've created these plans and these responses, and a team that's already stood up, it's just a phone call, and we're all going, so.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
And that holds true all the way to Gunnison County, because Marvel is part of the area that we've already identified also.
Yeah, I mean, I was just at the River District meeting, I'm also on Root Eye Water and Power, and I know that the frying pan is gonna feel the effects of the Root Eye releases.
Tell them to keep the Blue Step tunnel open.
Yeah, well, it
Keep
kind
it
of, there's only so much capacity, right? I mean, that's one of the gating factors.
That's okay, that means it's on that side of the hills and we know that's concerned.
Shut it over on that side, and then there's Twin Lakes, right?
So,
Yeah.
So can I say something? Anxiety, we all have anxiety. We don't know what Mother Nature is gonna throw at us. And we can't make a plan for everything that could happen. And that's why I'm trying to get you to pay attention to Pick and Alert. We're gonna put as much information on Pick and Alert as we possibly can, because we don't want you to leave your homes if you're gonna drive into an area that could risk your lives. So we're gonna do everything we can, but you also have to understand that we're kind of Mother Nature's mercy.
And I would just say, I know, I feel like I have to stomp up and down to get people to do what they need to do, but, good peace of mind comes with an insurance policy. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to over the years who said, you know what, it was great that I knew I had a flood policy because my neighbor who didn't, I could go help them save their property, and that just, it helps you sleep at night. So, I know it seems like overkill, or you think it's never gonna happen to you, we all joke, nobody wants to talk about, do I need a life insurance policy? Well, we're all gonna die, And not to say that this could ever happen, but it's the same kind of inertia that we fight, which she was saying people don't respond, and there's this inertia to think that it's never gonna happen to me. I mean, even in Boulder, I was sitting in a disaster center talking to people who had a plane question who had $70,000 worth of damage, and they said, well, I had my 100-year event, I'm gonna drop my policy next year. That's crazy. That's crazy. So,
Yes, ma'am.
Are you gonna be putting emergency routes that we need to go on? Because if it's Cattle Creek, we can't go down Valley. But if it's, you know, one of the ones up Valley, where we're supposed to go, are you gonna let us know that on that paperwork?
So if it's a general alert, no.
So we could go down potentially
Yeah,
to an area that.
if it's an alert that says we're gonna get 2 inches of rain in the next 15 minutes, we don't know. It's like I said when I opened, we don't expect the front of Basalt Mountain to have the same rainfall as the back of the mountain because it's proven to itself that it breaks up the weather events. So we're gonna give as much information as we can, and we may state, do not travel, down this road. But that would be a lot of information.
But that was probably later, once we know, again, talking about everybody monitoring and seeing what's gonna go, and a best estimated guess of, it's going this way right now, so don't go this way, but, so eventually you would, but initially, again, we don't know what's going to happen until it starts to happen. We can just guess.
Any other questions? Yes.
Sandbags, being distribution points. I know last year when the fire happened, I went out and looked my own sandbags, and when I asked the town, like, your headlights.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So as part of our incident action plan response, the agencies, Pickton County, Aspen, Carbon, or Basalt, we're asking homeowners if they want sandbags to go contact, a company that can supply them, the hardware stores, supply your own. We do have sandbags if we do have flooding events that we're going to protect critical infrastructure and critical public property. Eagle County has chosen to put sand down here in Elgin. The Up Valley up, we're not. So,
But again, that same sand it's available to us. Once we know what's going on, we'll be able to call it in and say, this is where it's at. But we're not going to be delivering it to your home. And things along those lines. We have it staged, ready to go, but we're not putting it out in any particular area. Again, monitoring for watching what's going on.
So again, if you have questions about where that location is, eaglecounty.us/flood planning. There's a map of those locations. It's available right now for self-service. I'm going to say two things. One, people using it for contractors or construction projects are the reason much of this community has decided that it's not a great idea to put this out. At the same time as I say that, I'm going to say there's nobody out there checking residential IDs. So if you're here from the Garfield County, if you're here from Basalt and you need sand to protect your personal property, it is available here to you in this community. That being said, that's really if you want to take preventative measures. If it does become a public safety issue, the team out here will be mobilizing very quickly to protect the life safety needs that there are. I really hope that we won't be getting to that point here in this community. Any other questions? All right, is there anybody from the panel that wants to do some final words? Oh, did I miss something? Yeah,
Just one last thing I forgot to mention. For all you folks in Garfield County and Cattle Creek specifically, if you have questions about your property, whether it's the flood or wildfire mitigation, because Cattle Creek's kind of a rodeo in there, wildfire wise. So we are happy to come up and do a consult on your property. We do them all the time. We've done them for years. So you can call the Carbondale Fire Station and we'll be happy to set that up. All right.
Wonderful. Anyone else up here have a few things they feel were left unsaid?
I would just like to commend all of you for being here. And somebody said earlier, go tell a couple of friends what information that you received. Ask them to tell a couple. It's like that old shampoo commercial, just keep growing. But the information that we're putting out is the information, the best information we have right now. And I know you have a lot of questions, and I know it's frustrating and anxiety time. But the message is going to have to take care of yourself and your property. So start looking at it, and this is that starting point for that, so thank you for being here.
And from my standpoint, it's really helpful for all of us to hear what questions you have and what things aren't clear, because that helps us shape what we're doing.
Katie Birch, I'm just curious, as a raise of hands, how many of you already have a go kit in place, have an emergency plan?
Some things to do tonight, right? Thank you very much for taking some time with us tonight. We'll stick around if there are any questions. Thanks.